Hello, my name is Miles Whalen, and today I'm going to be reading Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Chapter 9. The Midnight Duel. Harry never believed he would ever meet a boy he hated more than Dudley, but that was before he met Draco Malfoy. Still, first year Gryffindors only had potions with the Slytherins, so they didn't have to put with Malfoy much, or at least they didn't until they spotted a notice pinned up in Gryffindor common room that made them all groan. Flying lessons would be starting on Thursday, and Gryffindor and Slytherin would be learning together. Typical, said Harry darkly. Just what I always wanted, to make a fool of myself on a broomstick in front of Malfoy. He had been looking forward to learn to fly more than anything else. You don't know you'll make a fool of yourself, said Ron. Anyway, I know Malfoy's always talking about how good he is, but I bet that's all talk. Malfoy certainly did talk about flying. He complained loudly that first years never game on the house Quidditch team into long, boastful stories only seemed to end with him nearly escaping muggles and helicopters. He wasn't the only one, though. The way Seamus Finnegan told it, he'd spent most of his childhood around the country on his broomstick. Even Ron would tell anyone who would listen about the time he had almost hit a hand glider on Charlie's old broom. Everyone from the wizard families talked about Quidditch constantly. Ron had already the big argument with Dean Thomas, who had shared their dormitory about soccer. Ron couldn't see what was so exciting about the game with only one ball where no one was allowed to fly. Harry had caught Ron prodding Dean's poster of the West Ham soccer team, trying to make the players move. Neville had never been on a broomstick in his life because his grandma had never let him near one. Probably Harry felt she had a good reason, because Neville managed to have an extraordinary number of accidents even with both feet on the ground. Hermione Granger was almost as nervous about flying as Neville was. This was something you couldn't learn by heart out of a book. Not that she didn't try. At breakfast on Thursday, she bored them all stupid with flying tips she had gone out of the library book called Quidditch Through the Ages. Neville was hanging on to every word, desperate for anything that might help him hang on to his broomstick later. But everybody else was very pleased when Hermione's lecture was interrupted by a arrival of the mail. Harry hadn't had a single letter since Hagrid's note, something that Malfoy had been quick to notice, of course. Malfoy's eagle owl was always bringing him packages of sweets from home, which he opened gladly at the Slytherin table. A barn owl brought Neville a small package from his grandmother. He opened it excitedly and showed them a glass ball the size of a large marble, which seemed to be full of white smoke. It's a remember-all, he explained. Gran knows I forget things. This tells you if there's something you've forgotten. Look, you hold it tight like this, and if it turns red. Oh, his face fell because the remember suddenly glowed scarlet. you've forgotten something. Neville was trying to remember what he had forgotten when Draco Malfoy was passing the Gryffindor table and snatched the member out of his hand. Harry and Ron jumped to the feet, but they were half hoping for a reason to fight Malfoy. But Professor McGonagall, who could spot trouble quicker than any teacher in the school, was there in a flash. What's going on? Malfoy's got my Remembrall, Professor. Scowling, Malfoy quickly dropped the Remembrall back on the table. Just looking, he said, and slopped away with Crabbe and Goyle behind him. 3:30 that afternoon, Harry and Ron, the other Gryffindors, hurried down the front steps onto the grounds for the first flying lesson. It was a clear and breezy day, and the grass rippled under their feet as they marched down the sloping lawns toward a smooth, flat lawn on the opposite side of the grounds to the Forbidden Forest, whose trees were swaying darkly in the distance. The Slytherins were already there, and so were 20 broomsticks, lying in neat lines on the ground. Harry had heard Fred and George Weasley complain about the school broom, saying that some of them started to vibrate if you flew too high, or always flew slightly to the left. The teacher, Madame Hooch, arrived. She had short gray hair and yellow eyes like a hawk. Well, what are you waiting for? She barked. Everyone, stand by a broomstick. Come on, hurry up. She glanced down at his broom. It was old and Harry glanced down at his broom. It was old and some of the twigs stuck out at odd angles. Stick out your right hand and over your room, called Madame Hooch, up at the front, and say, up! Up! Said everyone, shouted. Harry's broom jumped into the air once, but it was one of the few that did. Hermione's Grangers suddenly rolled over the ground, and Neville's hadn't moved at all. Perhaps brooms like horses could tell if you were afraid. Thought Harry. There was a quaver in Neville's voice that said only too clearly that he wanted to keep his feet on the ground. Madame Hooch then showed them how to mount their brooms without sliding off the end, and walked up and down the rows, corrected the groups. Harry and Ron were delighted when she told Malfoy had been doing it wrong for years. Now when I blow my whistle, you kick off the ground hard, said Madame Hooch. Keep your broom steady, rise a few feet, and then come straight back down. Forward side. On my whistle. 3, 2, but Neville's nearly jumping and frightened of being left on the ground, pushed off hard before the whistle and had touched Madame Hooch's lips. Come back, boy! She shouted, but Neville was rising straight up like a cork shot out of a bottle. 12 feet, 20 feet. Harry saw that his scarred white face had looked down at the ground, falling away. Saw him gasp, slip sideways off the broom, and wham! A sudden nasty crack, and Neville lay face down in the grass in a heap. His broomstick was still rising higher and higher, started to drift lazily toward the Forbidden Forest and out of sight. Madame Hooch was bending over Neville, her face as white as his. Broken wrist. Harry heard her mutter. Come on, boy. It's all right. You get up. She turned to the rest of the class. None of you is to move while I take this boy to the hospital wing. You leave those brooms where they are, or you'll be out of Hogwarts before you can say Quidditch. Come on, dear. Neville, his face tear-struck, clutching his wrist, hobbled off with Madame Hooch who had her arm around him. No sooner were they out of earshot than Malfoy burst into laughter. Did you see his face? That great lump. The other Slytherins joined in. Shut up, Malfoy snapped Parvati Patil. Ooh, sticking up for Longbottom, said Pansy Parkinson, a hard-faced Slytherin girl. Never thought you'd like a fat little crybabies, Parvati. Look, said Malfoy, darting toward, snatching something out of the grass. That stupid thing Longbottom's glance sent him. The Glamberal glittered in the sun as he held it up. Give that here, Malfoy, said Harry quietly. Everyone stopped talking to watch. Malfoy smiled nastily. I don't think I'll leave it somewhere for Longbottom to find. How about up a tree? Give it here, Harry yelled. But Malfoy leapt onto his broomstick and taken off. He hadn't been lying. He could fly well. Hovering level with the topmost branches of an oak tree, he said, Come and get it, Potter. Harry grabbed his broom. No, shouted Hermione Granger. Madame Hooch told us not to move. You'll get us all in trouble. Harry ignored her. Blood was pounding in his ears. He mounted his broom and kicked hard against the ground, and up he soared. Air rushed through his hair, and his robes whipped out behind him. And in a rush of fierce joy, he realized he found something he could do without being taught. This was easy. This was wonderful. He pulled the broomstick up a little to take it even higher, and he heard screams and gasped goes back on the ground and Hermione whooped from Ron. He turned his broomstick sharply to face Malfoy. In midair, Malfoy looked stunned. Give it here, Harry called, or I'll knock you off that broom. Oh, yeah? said Malfoy, trying to sneer, but looking worried. Harry knew somehow what to do. He leaned forward and grasped the broom tightly in both hands and shot toward Malfoy like a javelin. Malfoy only just got out of the way in time. Harry made a sharp about face and held the broom steady. Few people below were clapping. No Crab and Goyle up here to save your neck, Malfoy, Harry called. The same thought seemed to struck Malfoy. Catch it if you can, then, he shouted. He threw the glass ball high into the air and screeched back toward the ground. Harry saw as though in slow motion the ball rise up in the air and then start to fall. He leaned forward and pointed his broom handle down. Next second, he was gathering speed in a steep dive, racing the ball. Wind whistling in his ears, mingled with the screams of people watching. He stretched out his hand, foot from the ground. He caught it just in time to pull his broom straight. He toppled gently onto the grass with the remember clutched safely in his fist. Harry Potter! His heart sank fast then he just dived. Professor McGonagall was running toward them. He got to his feet, trembling. Never! In all my time in Hogwarts! Professor McGonagall was almost speechless with shock, and her glasses flashed fiercely. How dare you? Might have broken your neck. It wasn't his fault, Professor. Be quiet, Miss Patil. But Malfoy, that's enough, Mr. Weasley. Potter, follow me now. Harry caught sight of Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle triumphant faces as he left. walking numbly in Professor McGonagall's wake. As she strolled toward the castle, he was going to be expect, just like he just knew it. He wanted to say something, defend himself, but there seemed to be nothing wrong with his voice. But there seemed to be something wrong with his voice. Professor McGonagall was sweeping along without even looking at him. He had to jog to keep up. Now he had done it. He hadn't even last 2 weeks. He'd be packing his bag in 10 minutes. What would the Dursleys say when he turned up on the doorstep? Up the front steps and up the marble staircase, inside and into Professor McGonagall. But still Professor McGonagall didn't say a word to him. He punched open doors and watched along corridors. Harry trotted miserably behind him. Maybe she was taking him to Dumbledore, he thought. Thought of Hagrid, expelled but allowed to stay on as gamekeeper. Perhaps he could be Hagrid's assistant, some twisted as he imagined it, watching Ron and others becoming wizards while he stumped around the grounds carrying Hagrid's bag. Professor McGonagall stopped outside the classroom. She opened the door and poked her head inside. "Excuse me, Professor Flitwick. Would I borrow wood for the moment?" Wood, thought Harry thought. Was wood a cane she was going to use on him? But Wood turned out to be a person, a burly fifth-year boy who came out of Flitwick's class looking confused. "Follow me, you two," said McGonagall, and they marched up in the corridor, Wood looking curiously at Harry. "In here." Professor McGonagall pointed them into a classroom that was empty except for Peeves, who was busy writing rude words on a blackboard. "Out, Peeves!" she barked. Peeves threw chalk into the bin with a clang loudly and swooped out cursing. Professor McGonagall slammed the door behind him, turned to face the two boys. "Potter, this is Oliver Wood. Wood, I found you a secret." Wood's expression changed from puzzlement to delight. "Are you serious, Professor?" "Absolutely," said Professor McGonagall. Said Professor McGonagall crisply. The boy's a natural. I've never seen anything like it. "Was that your first time on a broomstick?" said "First time on a broomstick, Potter?" Harry nodded silently. He didn't have a clue what was going on. It didn't seem to be being expelled. And some of the feeling started coming back to his legs. He caught that thing in his hand after 50-foot dive, Professors McGonagall told Wood. Didn't even scratch himself. Charlie Weasley couldn't have done it. Wood was now looking as though all his dreams are complete ones. "Ever seen a game of Quidditch, Potter?" "Yes," excitedly. Wood's captain of the Gryffindor team," Professor McGonagall explained. He's just the build for a secret too," said Wood, now walking around Harry, staring at him. "Light, speedy. We'll have to get him a decent broom, Professor. Nimbus 2000 or Cream Sweep 7, I'd say. I shall speak to Professor McGonagall. See if we can bend the first year rule. Heavens no. Heavens no. We need a better team than last year, flattened in the last match by Slytherin. Couldn't look at Severus Snape in the face for weeks. Professor McGonagall peered sternly over her glasses at Harry. I want to hear your training hard, Potter. Why might I change my mind about punishing you? Then she suddenly smiled. Your father would have been proud. He was an excellent Quidditch player himself. You're joking. It was dinner time. Harry had just finished telling Ron what had happened when he left the grounds with Professor McGonagall. Ron had a piece of steak and kidney pie halfway into his mouth, but he had forgotten all about it. Seeker, he said, but first years never. He must be the youngest house player in about a century, said Harry, shoveling pie into his mouth. He felt particularly hungry after his excitement. The afternoon, Wood told me. One was so amazed, so impressed, he just sat and gaped at Harry. I start training next week, only don't tell anyone. Wood wants to keep it a secret. Fred and George Weasley now came into the hall, spotted Harry and hurried over. Well done, said George in a low voice. Wood told us we're on the team too. Beat us. I'll tell you, we're going to win that Quidditch Cup for sure. This year, we haven't won since Charlie left. But this year's team is going to be brilliant. You must be good, Harry. Wood was almost skippy when he told us. Anyway, we've got to go. Lee Jordan reckons he's found a new secret passage out of the school. Bet it's the one behind the statue of Gregory the Smalley that we found our first week. See you. Fred and George had hardly disappeared when someone far less welcome turned up, flanked by Crabbe and Goyle. Having a last meal, Potter. When are you getting the train back to the Muggles? You're a lot braver now that you've got back on the ground and got your little friends with you. There was no, said Harry coolly. There was, of course, nothing at all little about Crabbe and Goyle, but as the high table was full of teachers, neither of them could do more than crack their knuckles and scowl. I'll take you on any time myself. Tonight, if you want, wizard duel, warns only no contact. What's the matter? You never heard of a wizard duel, I suppose? Of course he has, said Ron reeling out. I'm a second. Who's yours? Malfoy looked at Crabbe and Goyle, sizing them up. Crabbe, he said. Midnight over. All right. We'll meet you in the trophy room. That's always unlocked. When Malfoy had gone, Ron and Harry looked at each other. What is a wizard's duel? Said Harry. And what do you mean you're my second? Well, a second's there to take over if you die, said Ron casually, getting started at last on his cold pie. Catching the look on Harry's face, he added quickly, but people only die in proper duels, with real wizards. The most you and Malfoy will be able to do is send sparks at each other. Neither of you knows enough magic to do any real damage, but I bet he expects you to refuse anyway. What if I wave my wand and nothing happens? Throw it away and punch him on the nose, Ron suggested. Excuse me? They both looked up. It was Hermione Granger. Can a person eat in peace in this place? Said Ron. Hermione ignored him and spoke to Harry. I couldn't help you overhearing what you and Malfoy were saying. But you could, Ron muttered. And you mustn't go wandering around the school at night. Think of the points you'll lose, Gryffindor, if you're caught. And you're bound to be. It's really selfish of you. And it's really none of your business, said Harry. Goodbye, said Ron. All the same, it wasn't that you could call it the perfect end of the day, Harry thought, as he lay awake much later listening to Dean and Seamus falling asleep. Never wasn't back from the hospital wing. Ron had spent all evening giving him advice as if he tries to curse you. You better dodge it because I can't remember how to block them. There was very good chance they were going to get caught by future Mrs. Norris, but Harry felt that he was pushing his luck breaking another school rule today. And on the other hand, Malfoy's sneering face kept looming out of the darkness. This way. This was his big chance to beat Malfoy face to face. He couldn't miss it. Malfoy, 11:30, Ron muttered at last. You better go. They pulled on their bathrobes, picked up their wands, and crept across the tower roof, down the spiral staircase into the Gryffindor common. A few embers were still glowing in the fireplace, turning all the armchairs into hunched black shadows. They had almost reached the portrait hole when a voice spoke from the chair nearest to it. I can't believe you're going to do this, Harry. The lamp flickered on. It was Hermione Granger wearing a pink bathrobe and a frown. You, said Ron fiercely, go back to bed. I almost told you your brother. Hermione stopped. Percy, he's a prefect. He'll put a stop to this. Harry couldn't believe anyone could be so interfering. Come on, he said to Ron. Pushed open the portrait, the fat lady, and climbed through the hole. Hermione wasn't going to give up that easily. He followed Ron through the portrait hole, hissing at them like an angry goose. Don't you care about Gryffindor? Do you only care about yourselves? I don't want Slytherin to win the House Cup, and you'll lose all the points I've got from Professor McGonagall for knowing about switching spells. Go away. All right, but I warned you. You just remember what I said. When you are on the train home tomorrow, But what they were, they didn't find out. Hermione had turned to the portrait of the fat lady to get back inside and found herself facing an empty painting. The fat lady had gone on a nighttime visit, and Hermione was locked out of Gryffindor Tower. Now, what am I going to do? She asked shrilly. That's your problem, said Ron. We've got to go. We're going to be late. They hadn't even reached the end of the corridor when Hermione caught up with them. Coming with you, she said. You are not. Do you think I'm going to stand here out and wait for Filch to catch me? If he finds all three of us, he'll tell him the truth. That I was trying to stop you, and you can back me up. You've got some nerve, said Ron loudly. Shut up, both of you, said Ron. Sharply, I heard something. It was sort of shuffling. Mrs. Norris breathed once, squinting through the dark. It wasn't Mrs. Norris, it was Neville. He was curled up on the floor, fast asleep, but jerked suddenly awake as they crept near. Thank goodness you found me. I've been out here for hours. I couldn't remember the new password to get into bed. Keep your voice down, Neville. The password's fixed now, but it won't help you now the fat lady's gone off somewhere. How's your arm? Fine, said Neville, showing them. Man promptly mended it in about a minute. Good, well, look, Neville. We've got somewhere to be. We'll see you later. Don't leave me, said Neville, scrambling to his feet. I don't want to stay here alone. The bloody Baron's been past me twice already. Ron looked at his watch and then glared fiercely at Hermione and Neville. If either of you get us caught, I'd never rest until I've learned the curse of boogies Quirrell told us about, and use it on you. Hermione opened her mouth, perhaps to tell Ron exactly how to use the curse of boogies, but Harry hissed at her to be quiet and beckoned him them all forward. They flitted along corridors stripped with bars of moonlight from high windows. Every turn, Harry expected to run into Filch and Mrs. Norris, but they were lucky. They sped up a staircase to the third floor, tiptoed toward the trophy room. Malfoy and Crabbe weren't there. The crystal trophy cases glimmered where the moonlight caught them. Cups, shields, plates, and statues winked silver and gold in the darkness. They edged along the walls, keeping their eyes on the doors at either end of the room. Harry looked out his wand in case Malfoy leapt in and started at once. The minutes crept by. He's late. Maybe he's chickened out, Ron whispered. Then a noise in the next room made them jump. Harry had only just raised his wand when he heard someone speak. It wasn't Malfoy. Sniff around, my sweet. They might be lurking in a corner. It was Filch speaking to Mrs. Norris. Honor struck. Harry waved madly at the other three to follow him as quickly as possible. He scurried silently toward the door away from Filch's voice. The whistles are barely whipped around when Filch entered the trophy room. They're in here somewhere, they heard him mutter, probably hiding. This way, Harry mouthed to the others. Petrified, they began to creep down a long gallery for suits of armor. They could hear Filch getting near. There was only a lot of frightened squeak and brought into a run. He tripped, grabbed Ron on the waist, and the pair of them toppled right into a suit of armor, clanging and crashing more enough to wake the whole castle. Run! Harry yelled. Four of them sprinted down the gallery, not looking back to see whether Filch was following. They swung around doors, posts, and galloped down one corridor, then another, Harry in the lead, without any idea where they were going, or where they were going. They whipped through a taskbarty and found themselves in a hidden passage, wrote down it, and came out near the charms classroom, which they knew was miles from the trophy room. Think we've lost it, him, Harry panted, leaning against the cold wall, wiping his forehead. Never had been double, breathing and spent. I told you, Hermione gasped, clutching the stitch in her chest. I told you. We've got to get back to Gryffindor Tower quickly as possible. Malfoy tricked you, Hermione said to Harry. You realize that, don't you? He was never going to meet you. Filch knew someone was going to be in the trophy room. Malfoy must have tipped him off. Harry thought she was probably right, but he wasn't going to tell her that. Let's go. It wasn't going to be that simple. They hadn't gone more than a dozen paces when a doorknob rattled and something came shooting out of the classroom in front of them. It was Peeves. He caught sight of them and squealed delight. Shut up, Peeves, please. You'll get us thrown out, Peeves cackled. Wandering around at midnight. Ickle fusties. Tut, tut, tut. Naughty, naughty. Naughty, naughty. You'll get caughty. Not if you don't give us away. Peeves, please. Should I tell Filch? I should, said Peeves in a saintly voice, but his eyes glittered wickedly. It's for your own good, you know. Get out of the way, snapped Ron, taking a swipe at Peeves. This was a big mistake. Students out of bed, Peeves bellowed. Students out of bed, down the charms corridor. Ducking under Peeves and ran for their lives right to the end of the corridor where they slammed into a door and it was locked. This is it, Ron moaned as they pushed helplessly at the door. We're done for. This is the end. They could hear footsteps. Filch running as fast as he could toward Peeves' shout. Oh, move over, Hermione snarled. She grabbed Harry's wand, tapped the lock, whispered, Alohomora. And the lock clicked, and the door swung open, and they piled through, shut it quickly, and then pressed their ears against it, listening. Which way did they go, Peeves? Filch was saying. Quick, tell me. Say, please. Don't mess with me, Peeves. And where did they go? Shan't say nothing if you don't say please, said Peeves in his annoying sing-song voice. All right, please. Nothing. Ha 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 ha. Told you I wouldn't say nothing if you didn't say please. Ha 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 ha. They heard the sound of Peeves wishing away and Filch cursing in rage. He thinks the door is locked, Harry whispered. I think we'll be okay. Get off, Neville. But Neville had been tugging on the sleeve of bathrobes for the last minute. What? Harry turned around and saw quite clearly what. For a moment, he was sure he had walked into a nightmare. This was too much. On top of everything that had just happened so far, they weren't in a room, as he supposed. They were in a corridor, the forbidden corridor on the 3rd floor, and now they knew why it was forbidden. They were looking straight into a monstrous dog. A dog filled the whole space between the ceiling and the floor. It had 3 heads, 3 pairs of rolling eyes, mad eyes, 3 noses twitching and quivering in their direction, 3 drooling mouths, saliva hanging in slippery ropes from yellowish fangs. They knew, and Harry knew, that the only reason they weren't already dead was that the sudden appearance had taken it by surprise, but it was quickly getting over that. There was no mistake what those thunderous growls meant. Harry groped for the doorknob. Between Filch and death, he'd take Filch. They fell backward, Harry slammed the door shut, and they ran, and almost flew back down the corridor. Filch must have hurried off to look somewhere else, because they didn't see him anywhere. They hardly cared. All they wanted to do was put as much space as possible between them and that monster. They didn't stop running until they reached the portrait of the fat lady on the 7th floor. "Where on earth have you been?" she asked, looking at their faces, bathrobes hanging off their shoulders, and the flushed, sweaty faces. Never mind that. Pig snout, panted Harry, and the portrait swung forward. They scrambled into the common room and collapsed, trembling, into armchairs. It was a while before any of them said anything. Neville indeed looked as if he would never speak again. "What do they think they're keeping a thing like that locked up in the school?" said Ron finally. "If any dog needs exercise, that one does. Hermione has got both her breath back and her temper back again." "You don't use your eyes, any of you, do you?" he snapped. "Didn't you see what it was standing on?" "The floor," Harry suggested. "I wasn't looking at his feet. I was too busy with its heads." "No, not the floor. It was standing on a trap door. It's obviously guarding something." She stood up, glaring at them. I hope you're pleased with yourselves. You could have been killed, or worse, expelled. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to bed." Ron stared after her, his mouth open. "No, we don't mind," he said. "You think we dragged her along, wouldn't you?" Hermione had given Harry something else to think of. Now, as he climbed back into the bed, the dog was guarding something. But Hagrid said Gringotts was the safest place in the world for something you wanted to hide, except perhaps Hogwarts. It looked as though Harry had found out where the grubby little package in the vault 713 was. If you want to listen to Chapter 10 of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, you'll have to wait for the next video. Please like and subscribe for more videos.